Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take a whole stack of your sources, could be articles, research, maybe even your own notes, and we really pull out the most important bits of knowledge or insight.
That's right. And our mission today is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
Cut through all the noise and give you a genuine shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Yeah, hopefully with some surprising facts, maybe just enough humor to keep you hooked along the way.
Indeed. And today, wow, we have a really fascinating collection of material here. It covers, well, everything from business strategy, leadership, right through to finance, and even the way we actually make decisions as humans. It's quite a mix.
It really is a rich tapestry of thought, isn't it? And we're here to help you connect those dots, find those maybe unexpected links, and hopefully spark some of those aha moments.
Exactly, those moments that kind of shift your perspective.
So settle in, get comfortable. We're about to embark on a deep dive into how we think about building great things, making those critical decisions, and leading effectively, especially now, in a world that's just overflowing with information.
We'll be your guides on this,
Yep.
helping you understand what's really most important in this diverse material you've shared with us.
And hopefully maybe spark some new ideas for your own journey, too.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's dive straight in. Where do all great achievements really begin? It's got to be the foundations of strategy, right? But going beyond just the obvious stuff we hear all the time,
Right.
we throw that word strategy around constantly in business meetings, emails, everywhere. But what truly makes a good strategy stand out from a bad one? Is it just about having a plan? Or is there something, deeper?
That's such a crucial distinction. And Richard Rumelt, in his book, Good Strategy, Bad Strategy, he really clarifies this. It's quite powerful, actually. He argues that a good strategy isn't just a plan, it's fundamentally about making choices.
Choices.
Yeah, and it's not just about what you will do, but maybe even more importantly, about what you consciously decide not to do.
What not to do. That sounds simple, but I bet it's harder in practice.
Oh, it's incredibly hard. And the failure to make those clear, deliberate choices, it's a surprisingly common pitfall. Rumelt points out a couple of specific traps that, well, a lot of organizations fall into, often with the best intentions.
Okay, so if good strategy hinges on making these tough choices, what are the big illusions people fall for when they're trying to avoid making them? How does Rumelt sort of expose those?
That's a great way to put it, delusions. Because they aren't just simple mistakes, they're often these deeply ingrained ways of thinking. The first trap he flags is the do-it-all strategy.
The do-it-all sounds familiar.
Right. It's the danger of failing to make those clear choices, which results in making everything seem like a priority. Imagine a company trying to chase every single market segment, develop every potential product idea, jump on every new tech trend all at once.
Like chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The result is diluted effort, zero focus, and ultimately, well, mediocrity across the board. They just spread themselves way too thin.
Right. Trying to be everything to everyone.
And achieving nothing distinctive anywhere. It's a strategy that's not really a strategy at all. It's more like a wish list, isn't it?
Yeah.
The illusion there is thinking that by keeping all options open, you're maximizing opportunity. But in reality, you're just guaranteeing a lack of focus and impact.
Okay, so that's about picking your battles, not trying to fight on every front. Makes sense. What's the other big mistake then? The Don Quixote one.
That's the one. The second trap Rumelt calls the Don Quixote strategy. This is where companies attack the competitive walled cities, or they decide to take on the strongest competitor first, head-to-head, without any clear, unique advantage.
Like charging windmills.
Precisely. It's like charging straight into your rival's strongest fortress. It's often a predetermined losing battle because you're fighting on their ground against their established strength.
So what's the alternative?
Well, a good strategy looks for flanks, right? It looks for ways to leverage your own existing strengths or maybe create new ones rather than just trying to outmuscle the biggest player in their own game.
Cunning over brute force.
Exactly. The illusion here is that sheer willpower can overcome a fundamental structural disadvantage. But strategy, real strategy, demands a more, well, cunning approach than that.
That really clarifies things. Okay, so if good strategy means making tough choices and dodging these common pitfalls, where does a business actually find a genuinely strong, defensible, strategic position? How do you even know if you found one versus just, say, a temporary edge?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And Hamilton Helmer's 7 Powers framework offers an incredibly powerful lens for tackling that. He defines what he calls a power as a sustainable structural advantage that shields a business from competition.
A structural advantage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and his core argument is stark. If your business doesn't possess at least one of these 7 specific power types, then you essentially lack a viable strategy. You're inherently vulnerable.
Ah, that's a strong claim. No power, no viable strategy.
It is. But these power types are designed to cover basically all the attractive strategic positions out there. They offer a clear, unitary focus, and it's simple enough that, anyone in business can learn it, remember it, and actually use it. It's all about building a real fundamental moat around your business.
The moat analogy again. I like that. It makes it very clear. So it's not just a gimmick, not just clever marketing,
No.
but something really baked into the structure of the business
Hmm.
that makes it hard for others to attack. Can you give us a sort of feel for what that looks like in practice?
Sure. Think about the difference between two companies. Company A tries to compete by just copying what its rivals do. Maybe they offer a slightly lower price or add a tiny feature tweak.
Right, the Me Too approach.
Exactly. That's a really weak position, easily eroded. Now, compare that to Company B, which consciously invests in building a unique power. Maybe it's proprietary technology that's genuinely hard to replicate,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe it's strong network effects, I think it's social media, where every new user makes the platform more valuable for everyone else.
Yeah, classic example.
Or maybe it's economies of scale, like a massive e-commerce player, where their sheer size makes it impossible for smaller competitors to match their costs.
Got it.
The first company, Company A, is always chasing, always reacting. Company B, though, has created a defensible position, a moat. It allows them to thrive even when competition heats up. Helmer says you need at least one of these 7 powers to truly have a winning strategy. It's the difference between just playing the game better and actually changing the rules of the game in your favor by building these structural advantages.
It sounds like understanding the whole competitive landscape, the industry itself, is absolutely critical before you even start thinking about your own moves. You can't just strategize in a bubble.
Oh, absolutely. You hit on a core truth there. Michael Porter's work, particularly competitive strategy, is foundational here. He highlights how the underlying structure of an industry fundamentally determines how intense the competition is going to be.
The structure itself.
Yes. If you ignore this structure, you're essentially flying blind. You're sailing into uncharted waters without a map. Porter outlined several conditions that really dial up the rivalry, making it much harder for any company in that industry to sustain decent profits, no matter how well they run their own operations.
Okay, so what are some of those conditions? What makes an industry a real dogfight? And maybe, can you think of a modern example?
Sure. Porter notes that rivalry gets really intense when you have a lot of competitors, especially if they're roughly equal in size and power. Also, if the products or services are pretty standardized, basically commodities.
Price becomes the main lever.
Exactly.
Yeah.
High fixed costs are another factor, think airlines or manufacturing, because companies are tempted to slash prices just to fill capacity. And a really big one is slow industry growth. If the pie isn't growing, everyone fights harder for their slice. Under those conditions, firms often resort to what Porter calls shading prices, just small cuts. But it leads to these recurring bouts of retaliation. Price wars erupt, and profits get squeezed for everyone. Both attacking moves and defensive ones become way riskier.
So maybe like the early days of ride sharing, lots of players, similar service, big marketing spends.
That's a perfect example. Lots of players, relatively standardized service in the consumer's eyes, high fixed costs related to driver incentives and text platforms, all battling fiercely for market share in a rapidly growing but intensely competitive space. It led to brutal price wars and massive cash burn for years.
So if you find yourself in an industry like that, loads of similar players, slow growth, high costs, you're basically stuck in a perpetual price war, often just trying to survive. That sounds exhausting.
It is exhausting. And this framework really helps explain why some industries just seem locked in this constant, brutal fight for market share. Profits are razor thin, innovation might stall because everyone's just focused on survival. It's often a zero-sum game. So getting your head around these underlying structural forces is absolutely paramount for any strategic thinking. You need to know if you're walking into a boxing ring where everyone's slugging it out, or more of a chess match, and crucially, whether the rules of the game are stacked against you from the very beginning.
Given all these competitive pressures, this red ocean, as some call it, where everyone's fighting over the existing customers, how do companies actually break free? Can you really sidestep that head-to-head slugfest?
That's exactly the question W. Chan Kim and Renee Melbourne tackle in Blue Ocean Strategy. And their answer is compelling. You break free by consciously reconstructing market boundaries.
Reconstructing boundaries, how?
By creating entirely new, Previously unknown and uncontested market spaces, these blue oceans. Instead of battling rivals for existing demand, you create new demand, often by appealing to people who aren't currently customers of the industry at all, or by completely redefining what value means.
Okay, that sounds almost magical, like finding a whole new ocean when everyone else is stuck fishing in the same crowded pond. How does a company actually do that? Can you give us a classic example that really nails this idea of value innovation?
The classic textbook example they use is Southwest Airlines. They didn't just try to be a slightly better or cheaper version of existing airlines. No, they achieved this leap in value with a low-cost business model by fundamentally reinventing the short-haul airline industry.
How so? What did they change?
They looked at the existing trade-offs customers had to make. Back then, it was basically choose the speed of flying or the economy and flexibility of driving for shorter trips. Southwest broke that trade-off. They eliminated things other airlines competed on, like meals, assigned seats, complex hub-and-spoke routes, first-class cabins.
Stripped it right back.
Right. And they reduced other things, like maybe fancy airport lounges. But then they significantly raised factors like frequent, reliable departures and, crucially, super low prices. And they even created new factors inspired by car travel, like flying direct, point-to-point routes, making it much faster and simpler.
So they basically created a new category faster than driving, cheaper and simpler than traditional flying.
Exactly. They tapped into a massive market of people who previously would have just driven for those shorter distances because flying was too expensive or too much hassle. They didn't steal customers from other airlines as much as they created a whole new group of flyers. That's a blue ocean.
That's a brilliant reframing. And you mentioned something earlier about focusing on non-customers. That sounds incredibly counterintuitive. Aren't businesses supposed to live and die by their existing customers?
It really does sound counterintuitive, doesn't it?
Oh.
But it's a critical insight in blue ocean strategy. They point out a common red ocean trap. The mistaken belief that creating blue oceans is just about being customer-led in the traditional sense. Instead, they argue the real insights for reconstructing those market boundaries often come from exploring non-customers.
Why non-customers?
Because your existing customers. They tend to give you ideas for making your current offering incrementally better. Making them even happier with what you already do.
Yeah.
Which is fine, but it anchors you firmly in the red ocean.
Right. Small improvements on the existing model.
Exactly. Non-customers, on the other hand, hold the secrets to why the industry isn't bigger. They reveal the pain points, the reasons people aren't buying from anyone in your industry right now. Understanding that is what reveals the path to creating entirely new demand and unlocking a blue ocean. It's about finding the unmet needs and the points of friction that limit the current market.
That's a complete mind shift. Wow. So it's not just about having a clever product, it's about rethinking the entire business model, even who your potential market could be. And this distinction between value innovation and just pure tech innovation seems key here, too.
Absolutely central. Blue Ocean strategy makes a clear contrast. Value innovation is about creating that new demand by reshaping industry boundaries crucially, delivering both superior value and lower cost at the same time. It makes the competition irrelevant.
Okay.
Conventional technology innovation, on the other hand, often starts with high prices, limiting access, think price skimming for the latest gadget, and only focuses on lowering costs and prices much later. Value innovation aims for that breakthrough in both value and cost right from the start, making the offering accessible and appealing to a mass market, effectively creating that blue ocean.
And this intense focus on the business model, not just the tech or the product, that's something Reid Hoffman and Chrysia also hammer home in blitzscaling, isn't it? They see it as absolutely fundamental for massive growth.
Oh, completely. They highlight business model innovation as a primary engine for that kind of rapid, world-changing growth they call blitzscaling. They argue, and it's a point well taken, that a huge mistake many startups make is getting hyper-focused on the technology, the code, the product design.
The cool stuff.
Right, the cool stuff. But they neglect to really figure out the business model, meaning how does this thing actually make money? How do we acquire customers cost-effectively? How do we serve them sustainably? It sounds basic, but they contend that the founders we often hail as tech geniuses, they aren't just technology nerds, they're business nerds too. They deeply understand the mechanics of value creation and capture, and how to scale that engine.
So it's not enough to invent the world's best mousetrap. You need a scalable, profitable way to get it to everyone who needs a mousetrap. Google seems like the ultimate example of this, right? Amazing search tech, but the business model innovation was the real game changer.
It really was. Larry Page and Sergey Brin built these incredible search algorithms, no doubt. But it was their innovations in the search engine business model that truly fueled their meteoric rise. Specifically, deciding to rank ads based on relevance and performance, not just selling the top spot to the highest bidder.
That seems subtle but revolutionary.
It was. That shift fundamentally changed online advertising. It created an incredibly powerful economic engine that took Google from being a niche academic project to, well, the global giant it is today. The tech was necessary, but the business model was the rocket fuel.
And thinking about audacious business models, Jack Ma's vision for Alibaba comes to mind. He wasn't just building an e-commerce site. He was building an entire ecosystem in a place where the supporting infrastructure barely existed.
Exactly. The blitzscaling authors point this out. Ma realized the potential for e-commerce in China and other Asian markets was arguably even bigger long-term than in the U.S. And this was despite the fact that key pieces were missing things we take for granted, like reliable nationwide logistics like FedEx or ubiquitous payment systems like Visa or PayPal.
So he had to build those too, effectively.
In many ways, yes. He foresaw the massive growth of China's middle class, predicting it would reach 73% of the population by 2030. That huge potential prize justified the incredibly audacious vision and the willingness to build out the entire ecosystem, payments, logistics, marketplaces, not just one piece. He was focused on the future business model and the scale it required, seeing the whole forest where others only saw individual trees or perhaps the lack of roads between them.
It really seems like having that clear why behind the business, that fundamental purpose, is also essential to guide these massive strategic choices, to keep you on track when things get tough or when tempting distractions arise.
Simon Sinek, in Start With Why, illustrates this so powerfully with that classic story of the railroads.
Ah, yes, the railroads. What was the lesson there again?
Well, after achieving unbelievable success in the late 1800s, they completely lost sight of why they existed. Their fundamental purpose was transportation, connecting people, moving goods,
Yep.
but they became obsessed with what they did. They were in the railroad business, so they only invested in tracks and engines. This narrow focus, this loss of the why, tragically blinded them
Blinded them to what?
to the bigger picture. They couldn't see the emerging opportunities in trucking or airlines, which were also fundamentally about transportation. They failed to adapt because they defined themselves by their current activity, not their core purpose. They were stuck being the railroad business instead of evolving as the transportation business, and that myopia ultimately cost them dearly.
That's such a powerful lesson in strategic vision and a real warning about how easily organizations can get stuck in their own what. Okay, so we've covered defining good strategy, finding blue oceans, innovating business models, holding on to your why. But what ultimately drives competitive advantage over the long haul? How do you sustain that edge when everyone else is trying to catch up?
A.G. Lafley and Roger Martin, drawing on their experiences turning around P&G and playing to win, offer some critical insights here. They really emphasize learning how to differentiate and distinguish a business, how to create competitive advantage, and how to generate meaningful value. And crucially, they did this in mature, slow-growing, hyper-competitive industries, like consumer goods.
Not exactly easy environments.
No, not at all. Their constant focus was on playing to win, not just playing to participate or playing not to lose. For them, strategy wasn't a document. It was an integrated set of choices designed to achieve sustainable competitive advantage across the entire company.
Okay, differentiation is key. But what if your product or service isn't truly unique? What if it's becoming, or already is, kind of a commodity? That's a huge fear for so many businesses today.
That's a very real challenge. Lafley and Martin are clear on this. If you have a similar offering, maybe not a pure commodity like wheat, but something without strong differentiation like a standard light bulb or a basic laptop model, then the only viable strategy for competitive advantage is a low-cost one.
Race to the bottom. Essentially, yes. It means you have to relentlessly drive your costs down, aiming to be in the bottom quarter or third of the industry cost curve. Now, this can ensure profitability, but you remain incredibly vulnerable. You're always at the mercy of the absolute lowest cost player, who can trigger price wars at any moment and crush margins for everyone else. It's a tough, constant battle, and you only win if you are truly the most efficient.
So whether it's radical differentiation or ruthless cost leadership, the goal is always that sustainable advantage. But Lafley and Martin focus on differentiation, while Jeff Bezos at Amazon famously took a different path, recognizing how hard it is to have one killer differentiator.
Exactly. Brad Stone's book, The Everything Store, captures this perfectly. He quotes Bezos during an argument about protecting Amazon's one-click patent. Bezos said something like, look, we don't have a single big advantage, so we have to weave a rope of many small advantages.
Weave a rope. I like that image. It perfectly encapsulates Amazon's approach. Disciplined, precise, incredibly adaptable. Bezos was known for constantly scribbling ideas, being willing to ditch old notions if better ones came along. Crucially, he defined Amazon not just as a retailer, but as a technology company, and hired accordingly. This philosophy-building advantage through countless small, interconnected improvements powered by technology and an obsessive customer focus created this incredibly formidable competitive moat. Even without one single, easily copied big thing, it's the compounding effect of all those small, well-executed strategic choices that makes them so incredibly hard to compete against.
That's a fantastic transition point. We've talked about crafting these brilliant strategies, weaving ropes, finding blue oceans, but as we all know too well, even the best plans can just sit on a shelf if they aren't executed effectively. So let's pivot now to that crucial second act, the art and science of execution. How do leaders actually translate those strategic choices into daily actions and ultimately real results on the ground?
Right, because strategy without execution is just, well, wishful thinking. And this is where Peter Drucker's insights are absolutely foundational. In the practice of management, he makes a really critical point. For an organization to actually perform its function, to make its contribution, each manager has to develop and set the objectives of their own unit themselves.
Themselves, not just handed down from above.
Exactly. Higher management obviously approves them, but the actual development, that's the manager's primary responsibility. And Drucker is clear, this isn't just about making people feel included, not just human relations jargon, as he put it. Okay, so what is it about then? It's about demanding genuine responsibility. It requires a positive act of assent. Managers need to deeply understand the ultimate business goals, what's really expected of them, and why, and crucially, how their performance will be measured. It's about fostering true ownership, not just passive compliance. That ownership is a powerful driver of effective execution.
So it's not just cascading goals down, it's about co-creating them at each level, ensuring everyone understands their piece of the puzzle and how it fits the bigger picture. What about the leader's own effectiveness? Managing their own time and energy seems like a perpetual challenge, especially today.
Oh, absolutely. It's maybe the challenge. In The Effective Executive, Drucker identifies concentration as the one secret of effectiveness. His core advice is deceptively simple. Effective executives do first things first, and they do one thing at a time.
One thing at a time. Easier said than done.
Isn't it just? He observes that there are always more important contributions to be made than we have time for. This creates a constant time deficit, which means ruthless prioritization isn't just nice to have, it's essential. You simply cannot do everything well, so the ability to focus intensely on what matters most is paramount.
That definitely resonates. It feels like a universal struggle. But Drucker also had this really unique insight into time waste, didn't he? Something that wasn't about external factors, but about the leader themselves.
He did, and it's quite profound, maybe even a bit uncomfortable. Drucker points out that a huge common cause of time waste is largely under the executive's own control. Specifically, the time of others he himself wastes.
Ouch, how do you even figure that out?
His suggestion is simple, but requires real humility. Systematically and without being defensive, ask your colleagues, what do I do that wastes your time without contributing to your effectiveness?
Wow, that takes courage.
It really does. But it's an incredibly powerful tool for self-awareness and improvement because we're often completely blind to how our own habits, maybe poorly planned meetings, unclear requests, constant interruptions, impact everyone else's productivity.
That's a challenging mirror to hold up.
It is. And related to this, he also talks about leveraging people. He says the executive's task isn't to change human beings fundamentally. Instead, like in the parable of the talents, it's to multiply performance capacity of the whole by putting to use whatever strength, whatever health, whatever aspiration there is in individuals. Focus on their strengths, not fixing weaknesses. It's a very empowering perspective on management.
That focus on strengths and multiplying capacity connects perfectly to the idea of continuous learning and development within an organization, doesn't it? If you want to leverage strengths, you need to help people build them.
Absolutely. Andrew S. Grove in High Output Management echoes this strongly. He sees training not as a one-off event, not an emergency fix when things go wrong, but as a continuous process, something employees can rely on, something systematic and scheduled.
So part of the regular rhythm of work.
Yes. And he argues, quite forcefully, that if you truly believe training and motivation improve performance, then you, the manager, should be the one instructing your direct subordinates, and maybe even the people one level below them.
The manager as teacher.
Precisely. This hands-on approach ensures that what's being taught is directly tied to what's being practiced day to day. It makes the learning immediately relevant, embedded in the actual work, not just some abstract theoretical exercise happening in a separate classroom. It integrates development into the very fabric of how the team operates.
Okay, so individual effectiveness driven by focus and continuous learning led by the manager. But what about how people work together? Building high-performing teams seems like another crucial piece of the execution puzzle, especially getting clarity and alignment.
It's absolutely essential. John Katzenbach and Douglas Smith, in The Discipline of Teams, really highlight the critical importance of articulating a team's overall aspiration, defining its mission clearly.
More than just tasks and deadlines.
Much more. It involves getting crystal clear on the challenges the team faces, agreeing on them, and then establishing those smart, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound, outcome-based goals. When these purpose statements are brief, urgent, and genuinely meaningful to every single member, they work to capture the emotional commitment needed to pursue them effectively. It creates that shared why for the team itself.
So having that clear North Star is vital, but they also talk about language, right? Ensuring everyone's speaking the same language about how the team operates. That seems subtle, but important.
Very important. They stress the need to enforce a common language that clearly differentiates between when the group is operating as a true team with shared accountability versus when it's operating under a single leader discipline.
Why is that distinction so critical?
Because clear language is vital for successful change. It brings clarity to roles, responsibilities, and expectations. It helps measure support efforts based on actual performance results, not just activities. For instance, knowing whether a decision is being made collectively or by the leader avoids confusion, manages expectations, and builds trust. Without that shared understanding, efforts get muddled, wires get crossed, and frustration inevitably builds up.
But let's get real here. Teams aren't always kumbaya circles, are they? Conflict, friction, frustration. These are inevitable when you put passionate people together with different ideas. How do you handle that productively?
Far from it. Patrick Lencioni, in his book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, makes a powerful point. Teams often don't argue very well.
Don't argue well? Meaning what?
Meaning they either avoid conflict altogether, leading to bottle-up frustration and artificial harmony where crucial issues never surface, or the conflict becomes personal, destructive, and political. Neither is healthy.
So what's the solution?
Lencioni frames team building as a necessary process, not some quick fix or off-site activity. It requires honestly confronting the issues, including the lack of healthy conflict. He encourages teams to learn how to engage in productive ideological conflict, debating ideas vigorously without fear of personal attack. The absence of this productive conflict, he argues, is deeply detrimental because it means important perspectives aren't aired, assumptions aren't challenged, and the team settles for suboptimal decisions just to keep the peace. So you need to cultivate the right kind of conflict focused on ideas, not people. That's a delicate balance. How do you lead a team, then, in an environment that's not just complex, but incredibly fast-moving, maybe even dangerous, where traditional hierarchy might just be too slow? This sounds like General McChrystal's territory with Team of Teams. Exactly. Team of Teams, written by General Stanley McChrystal and his colleagues, offers a really compelling model for precisely that scenario. To effectively combat a networked, agile adversary like al-Qaeda in Iraq, his conventional hierarchical military task force had to fundamentally transform itself. It had to become a network itself, a team of teams.
A network of teams. How did they make that work?
It involved this fascinating yin and yang symmetry, as they call it, between two key elements. First, shared consciousness. This was achieved through incredibly rigorous, centralized communication forums, daily briefings involving thousands, and radical transparency. Everyone needed access to the big picture.
Okay, shared understanding. What was the yang?
The yang was empowered execution. This meant decentralizing managerial authority, pushing decision-making power down to the edges of the network, to the teams closest to the action.
So centralized information, decentralized action. That sounds like a paradox.
It does, but it worked. The underlying principle, the thing that made it possible, was a profound culture change. That cultural shift was actually more important than the technology they used. It allowed them to properly leverage the tech for communication and coordination.
Can you give a practical example of how that culture looked?
Yeah, there's a great one. One Army Special Forces squadron commander actually mandated that his operators physically sit with the intelligence analysts. They had to take notes on how the analysts worked, how they thought, what specific information they found most useful. The goal was to ensure everyone, operators and analysts alike, was knee-deep in the fight all of the time. It broke down silos, built trust, and fostered that shared understanding needed for rapid, decentralized, yet coordinated action.
Wow, physically breaking down the silos. Okay, what about when things just go wrong? Setbacks happen, pressure mounts, uncertainty reigns. How do leaders keep things moving forward and guide their teams through those inevitable crises, especially when the stakes are incredibly high and emotions are understandably frayed?
Jocko Willink and Leif Babin, former Navy SEALs, tackle this head-on in Extreme Ownership. They stress the absolute necessity, especially in combat, but applicable anywhere, for leaders to be comfortable under pressure and act on logic, not emotion.
Easier said than done when things are chaotic.
Absolutely. But they argue that outcomes are never certain, the picture is never perfectly clear, so leaders must be able to act decisively amidst that uncertainty, making the best call they can with the information available right then and there. Delaying or freezing up isn't an option.
And they talk about dealing with bureaucracy too, right? Even in life or death
Oh,
situations.
yeah. They even recount dealing with mountains of paperwork and what they felt were stupid questions from their own chain of command. It's a stark reminder that these kinds of organizational frustrations exist at all levels, even when the core mission is incredibly critical. The principle of extreme ownership means you take full responsibility for everything in your world, including navigating that bureaucracy without making excuses. You lead from the front, no matter the obstacle.
Elon Musk often comes across as someone embodying that relentless drive, maybe even a demanding version of it, constantly pushing through immense challenges and setbacks.
He certainly does. Ashley Vance's biography paints a picture of Musk making often grueling demands on his teams, being quick to fire people, sometimes even taking credit for designs in ways that could, cause friction. It's not always smooth.
But effective in turning problems around.
That's the key takeaway, particularly from the early chaotic days of Tesla. Musk showed this remarkable knack for turning any snafu like a product recall or a production delay into an excuse to showcase the company's responsiveness, its dedication to service, and its commitment to pleasing the customer. He could strategically pivot, often transforming a potential negative story into an opportunity to reinforce the brand's values and its mission. It's a different kind of extreme ownership, not just fixing the immediate problem, but strategically leveraging the situation itself.
So it's not always about hiding the bad news. What about sharing the burden, especially when things look really dire? Is it better to shield the team or bring them into the problem?
Ben Horowitz, in The Hard Thing About Hard Things, comes down strongly on the side of transparency. His advice is blunt. Share every burden that you can and get the maximum number of brains on the problems, even if the problems represent existential threats.
Even the really scary stuff.
Especially the scary stuff. He tells this powerful story from his time at Opsware. They were losing deal after deal to competitors. The company was genuinely at risk. Instead of trying to spin it, he called an all-hands meeting and laid it bare. He told the entire company, essentially, we are getting our asses kicked, and if we don't stop the bleeding, we are going to die.
Wow. How did people react?
Instead of panic, that radical transparency galvanized the team. They rallied, focused intensely on understanding why they were losing, built a product that addressed the core issues, and ultimately saved the company. Horowitz's memorable line captures the intensity. This is not checkers. This is motherfucking chess. It underscores the high stakes and the absolute need for everyone to be fully engaged in solving the really hard problems. You can't solve existential threats by pretending they don't exist or trying to handle them in isolation.
That's a powerful argument for transparency. It leads us nicely into our next big area, navigating uncertainty, really digging into the human element in decision-making. We live in this age of constant information bombardment, news alerts, social feeds, data dashboards everywhere. Common sense might suggest that having more data automatically leads to better decisions, clearer understanding, but I have a feeling it's not quite that simple, is it?
Not simple at all. In fact, Nassim Nicholas Taleb in The Black Swan offers this really crucial, deeply counterintuitive insight. Information can actually be toxic.
Toxic. How can information be toxic?
It fundamentally challenges that common more is better assumption. He cites studies, for instance, looking at clinical psychologists. As they were given more and more information about a patient, their actual diagnostic accuracy did not improve.
It didn't get better.
No. But what did increase significantly was their confidence in their original diagnosis.
Hmm.
They felt smarter, more certain, even though their performance hadn't changed.
Wow. So more data boosted confidence, but not actual accuracy.
Yeah,
Well, that's kind of alarming, isn't it? Especially given how much data we all consume every day.
it is alarming. And he gives another example with bookmakers predicting horse race outcomes. They were given more and more variables, track conditions, jockey history, horse lineage, whatever. Did their accuracy in picking winners go up?
Let me guess. No.
Nope. Accuracy stayed flat. But their confidence in the picks they made went up markedly. Taleb's point is that more is sometimes, but not always, better. And this unchecked confidence, fueled by consuming ever more information without a corresponding increase in understanding, can be truly toxic.
Yeah.
It can lead to taking bigger risks or having a dangerous false sense of security. It's a powerful reminder that our perception of knowledge isn't always the same as actual knowledge.
So our brains can easily trick us into thinking we know more or that we're more accurate than we really are. This sounds like the kind of cognitive bias that Daniel Kahneman has spent his career exploring, right? How our minds process information in these often unhelpful, automatic ways.
Exactly. Kahneman, in Thinking Fast and Slow, delves deep into this. He gives this great example involving students being taught about a classic social psychology experiment. Maybe the one showing why bystanders sometimes don't help someone in distress, which is counterintuitive. The students would learn the results, understand the statistics, but then, Kahneman observed, they would quietly exempt themselves and their friends and family from the experiment's conclusions. They didn't fundamentally change their view of human behavior. They intellectually grasped it, but didn't internalize it. They still thought, well, I would help, or my friends aren't like that.
Mm-hmm.
They believed they, or their immediate circle, were somehow immune to these documented psychological effects.
So how do you break through that? How do you get people to not just know something intellectually, but to actually feel its implications and let it change their understanding of the world or themselves?
Well, Kahneman and his colleagues found a fascinating way. Instead of just telling students the overall results of the bystander experiment, they tried something different. They described the experimental setup, but didn't reveal the group outcome. Then, they showed the students videos or descriptions of specific individuals in the experiment who failed to help the person in distress.
Show them the individual cases first.
Yes. And then they asked the students to guess the overall results for the whole group, the
Right.
outcome. Kahneman called it dramatic. The students' guesses were now extremely accurate.
Wow. Why the difference?
It suggests that making the abstract data concrete and personal is incredibly powerful. Seeing the specific instances forced them to confront the uncomfortable reality in a way that aggregate statistics didn't. It bypassed that tendency to exempt oneself. It shows how profoundly the framing and presentation of information impacts our understanding and our ability to overcome biases.
That makes me think immediately of the challenges companies face trying to predict the future market trends, consumer tastes, especially when they're planning years ahead for something like a new car model. Predicting human behavior is hard enough in a controlled lab, let alone in the messy, shifting reality of the marketplace.
Oh, absolutely. Alfred P. Sloan Jr., writing decades ago in my years with General Motors, talked about this very practical difficulty. Planners trying to gauge the market correctly years in advance can become remote from the realities of the marketplace.
Remote.
Well, consumer reactions to drawings, surveys, or focus group questions about future models are often undependable. Why? Because, as Sloan put it, it's an axiom of marketing research that automobile customers never know whether they like the product well enough to buy it until they can actually see the real thing.
You have to see it, touch it, drive it.
Exactly. But by the time the actual car is ready, millions have been invested based on that potentially flawed early feedback. It becomes incredibly hard to pivot, even if the market has shifted or the initial research was off. The further you get from the tangible reality for the customer, the higher the risk of building something based on your own assumptions, not their actual desires.
Okay, so we've got cognitive traps, toxic information, the unreliability of predictions. With all these complexities swirling around, how do we even begin to properly assess and manage risk, especially in high-stakes areas like investing, where emotions can just take over?
Howard Marks, in The Most Important Thing, really hammers this home. He insists that risk assessment isn't just a part of investing, it's an absolutely essential element. And crucially, he observes that improper amounts of risk aversion are key drivers of market extremes, the bubbles and the crashes.
Improper amounts, meaning too much or too little.
Both. In bubbles, he says there's a dearth of risk aversion. People get greedy, they ignore risk, they pile in. Then in crashes, the pendulum swings violently the other way. Investors fear too much, becoming excessively irrationally risk-averse, selling everything at the bottom. It's this psychological roller coaster that causes the biggest problems.
So it's less about the sophisticated financial models failing and more about human psychology running wild.
That's precisely Mark's conclusion. He argues that the gravest market losses have their genesis in psychological errors, not analytical miscues. It's not that people can't do the math, it's that their judgment gets completely warped by these powerful, almost universal human emotions. The desire for more, the fear of missing out, the tendency to compare against others, the influence of the crowd, and the dream of the sure thing. These psychological forces often just overwhelm rational analysis, especially when the market gets frothy or fearful. People end up buying high and selling low, the exact opposite of the rational strategy.
That fear of missing out, FOMO, and the herd mentality, they're incredibly powerful. And Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein in Nudge, they identified another really specific psychological quirk that deeply affects our decisions, especially around gains and losses.
Yes, they introduced the now famous concept of loss aversion.
Loss aversion. Remind me exactly what that is.
It's the idea that psychologically the pain we anticipate feeling from a loss is significantly more powerful, maybe even twice as powerful as the pleasure we anticipate feeling from an equivalent gain.
Losing hurts more than winning feels good.
Pretty much, yeah. And this simple predisposition has profound impacts on our choices, on how markets work, how we react to price changes. It helps explain why we might cling on to a losing investment, hoping it'll recover just to avoid realizing the loss, or why we're so reluctant to give up something we already own, even if we wouldn't buy it today, the endowment effect. That anticipated pain of losing really shapes our behavior in often irrational ways.
Okay, so understanding these biases, loss aversion, overconfidence from information, the tendency to exempt ourselves is crucial. But how do we navigate disagreements, especially challenging ones like disagreeing with your boss, when all these emotions and biases are inevitably swirling around? You can't just avoid conflict forever.
No, you definitely can't. And Kim Scott's Radical Candor offers a really practical framework for handling disagreement and giving tough feedback effectively. Let's say your boss gives you some criticism and you honestly think they're wrong. What do?
Bite your tongue, argue back immediately.
Scott suggests a different path. First, find something in the criticism you can genuinely agree with, even if it's small. This signals you're listening and open, not just defensive. Second, check for understanding. Repeat back what you heard them say in your own words to make sure you're on the same page. So what I'm hearing is you think X because of Y.
Buys you time, too.
Exactly. Third, let them know you want to think about it and suggest scheduling a follow-up conversation. This avoids an immediate emotional reaction and allows for reflection. And fourth, when you do follow up, explain clearly and calmly exactly why you disagree, using specific examples or reasoning.
So it's structured, respectful disagreement.
Yes. It encourages continued dialogue, keeps the focus on the issue, not the person, and honestly, sometimes in thinking it through, you might even realize there were flaws in your own initial reasoning. It's about seeking the best answer together, not winning the argument.
That sounds like a much more productive approach. And what about managing that relationship with your boss more broadly? It can be tricky territory.
It really can. John Gabaro and John Cotter wrote a classic piece called Managing Your Boss, and they make some sharp observations. They say, look, you probably can't change your boss's fundamental personality, but you could become aware of your own reactions to them.
Our own patterns.
Yeah. Do you tend to overreact to conflict, dig in your heels, escalate the argument, or do you underreact, swallow your anger, become overly compliant just to avoid friction? Knowing your own tendencies is the first step.
Okay, self-awareness. Then what?
Then the burden really falls on you, the subordinate, to proactively find out what your boss's expectations actually are, especially if they tend to be vague or unclear. Don't just wait for them to tell you.
How do you do that without seeming annoying?
They suggest things like drafting detailed memos, outlining your understanding of priorities or project plans, and then following up with face-to-face discussions specifically designed to surface those expectations. Actively seek clarity, because unspoken, ambiguous expectations are an absolute breeding ground for frustration, misunderstanding, and ultimately poor performance on both sides.
So take ownership of clarifying expectations. Okay, moving beyond the external dynamics and cognitive traps, what about our internal landscape? What internal qualities really help people navigate all this complexity and not just survive, but actually thrive, especially when facing setbacks?
This is where Angela Duckworth's work on grit
Yeah.
comes in, particularly her focus on the growth mindset.
Growth mindset versus fixed mindset.
Mhm.
What's the core difference again?
The growth mindset is this deep-seated belief that people really can change, that abilities, intelligence, skills, they aren't fixed. You
Yeah.
can get smarter, you can develop new talents if you get the right opportunities, the right support, and crucially, if you try hard enough and believe you can do it.
And the fixed mindset.
The fixed mindset assumes the opposite, that
Mhm.
your talent, your intelligence, your capacity, it's basically set in stone. You either have it or you don't.
And that difference becomes really critical when you face challenges, right?
Hugely critical. When you inevitably hit a setback, you get a bad grade, a project fails, you get negative feedback. A fixed mindset becomes a tremendous liability. You interpret that failure as evidence that you just don't have the right stuff. It confirms your limitations.
Discouraging.
Very. But a growth mindset, it helps you see that same setback differently. You believe you can learn to do better. The challenge isn't a verdict on your inherent worth. It's an opportunity to learn, adapt, and improve. It fuels resilience and perseverance precisely when things get tough.
So it's fundamentally about how we frame challenges and our own capacity for development. Stephen Covey also talks a lot about our internal state, particularly about being proactive and focusing our energy effectively.
He does, very strongly. In The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Covey emphasizes proactivity, taking responsibility for your choices and reactions. A key part of this is focusing your time and energy on your circle of influence.
Circle of influence versus circle of concern.
Exactly. Your circle of influence contains the things you actually can control or do something about: your actions, your attitude, your skills. Your circle of concern includes everything else you might worry about, but have no real control over: the global economy, other people's behavior, the weather.
So focus where you can make a difference.
Right. Covey argues that by focusing your energy positively on your circle of influence, you actually cause it to enlarge and magnify your impact. Worrying about things outside your control just drains energy and fosters a sense of victimhood. Proactivity means taking initiative within your sphere of influence.
And he also championed the idea of a personal mission statement, didn't he? Like a strategic plan for your own life.
Yes, he saw it as creating a personal constitution, something that defines your core values and purpose. And he was clear, this isn't something you dash off in an afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
It requires deep introspection, careful analysis, thoughtful expression, and often many rewrites.
A living document.
Exactly. It acts as your personal criterion by which you measure everything else in your life. It provides that internal compass to guide your decisions, ensuring your daily actions align with what truly matters most to you.
Yeah.
He also touched on whole brain thinking, the idea of balancing our logical, analytical left brain with our intuitive, creative right brain. Cultivating that ability to switch between dissecting the parts and synthesizing the whole, depending on what the situation requires.
That makes sense. And finally, amidst all this effort and striving, the role of praise and encouragement seems crucial, especially during that learning curve when people are trying new things, maybe operating with that growth mindset but still stumbling.
Absolutely vital. The new 1-Minute Manager by Ken Blanchard and Spencer Johnson makes a simple but powerful point about investing in people through positive reinforcement. Their famous advice is to catch them doing something approximately right.
Approximately right, not perfectly right. Exactly. Especially for new people or people tackling new tasks or roles. They argue that too many managers wait until someone does something exactly right before offering any praise.
Which might never happen if they don't get encouragement along the way.
Precisely. That lack of reinforcement during the learning process can actually prevent people from ever reaching high performance. They need those legitimate 1-minute praisings, specific, immediate positive feedback to know they're on the right track and to stay motivated. It's about shaping behavior by celebrating progress, building confidence step by step, not just waiting for perfection. It fosters a safer environment for people to learn, stretch, and ultimately grow.
Okay, let's zoom out now for our final section. We've looked at strategy, execution, the human mind, and decision-making. Now let's consider the broader landscape: markets, finance, and the societal impact of all this activity. How do these larger economic and financial systems shape the world we operate in? It's a crucial context. And John Brooks's Business Adventures, though recounting historical events, offers incredibly vivid insights into market behavior that feel timeless. For instance, he describes the sheer mechanics of the market under stress. During a frantic trading day back in 1962, the stock exchange ticker tape, the way prices were communicated then, was running 6 minutes late, even at its maximum speed.
6 minutes? That's an eternity in trading.
It is. And even worse, on Black Thursday in October 1929, it was reportedly 246 minutes behind. 246 minutes.
Unbelievable.
It just illustrates the sheer difficulty, the near impossibility of knowing what was really happening in real time when the system got overwhelmed. It highlights the fragility beneath the surface and the potential for panic when information flow breaks down. A stark contrast to today's high-frequency trading, but the principle of system stress remains.
It really underscores our reliance on technology now. What about the less savory side of markets? Insider trading seems like a perennial issue.
Brooks covers that too, with a classic Texas Gulf sulfur case. Basically, company executives learned about a massive, promising mineral discovery before it was public knowledge. What did they do? They started making significant stock purchases, even using complex options contracts, calls they barely understood, all based on that secret information.
To profit before the news broke.
Exactly. It perfectly demonstrates the powerful lure of quick, illicit gains when you have access to privileged, market-moving information. The temptation can be immense.
But sometimes the big players like central banks have to step in forcefully, almost like a coordinated military operation to stabilize things, right?
Yes, Brooks recounts a fascinating example of this. The bear squeeze, orchestrated by central banks, including the U.S. Federal Reserve and the Bank of England, during the 1967 crisis threatening the British pound sterling.
A bear squeeze. What did they do?
They hatched this plan, apparently with military precision, in Basel, Switzerland. They used billions in international credit lines as ammunition to collectively buy up sterling in the markets, driving the price up sharply. The goal was explicitly to confuse and disconcert the enemy, who in this case were the currency speculators betting against the pound. It shows powerful institutions taking coordinated, strategic action, not for profit, but for the perceived public good of financial stability. A high-stakes game indeed.
And sometimes it's not malicious action, but a fundamental misunderstanding of the financial instruments themselves that causes chaos. The 2008 subprime mortgage crisis seems like the ultimate example of that.
Well, absolutely. Michael Lewis's The Big Short masterfully dissects this. A core issue was a profound misunderstanding of those infamous collateralized debt obligations, or CDOs.
Those bundles of mortgages.
Right, especially the ones filled with risky subprime mortgages. The financial models used by major institutions assumed that the correlation between defaults on these different mortgages within a CDO bundle would be relatively low, maybe 30%, for example.
Meaning if one defaulted, it wouldn't necessarily mean others would.
That was the assumption. But the reality, particularly for the riskiest triple B-rated tranches of subprime CDOs, was that the correlation was effectively 100%. When the housing market turned, if one loan went bad, they all went bad simultaneously.
Because they were all exposed to the same systemic risk.
Precisely. This fundamental misreading of risk and correlation, this failure to truly understand the nature of the subprime CDO, led directly to billions upon billions in losses and brought the entire global financial system to the brink of collapse. It wasn't just a few bad loans. It was a systemic failure based on flawed assumptions embedded in complex financial products nobody fully understood.
Carlota Perez, in her work on finance and technical change, talks about financial bubbles as a recurring feature of technological revolutions. Are they just destructive forces, or do they play some kind of role?
It's a nuanced view. Perez argues that these financial bubbles, while dangerous, almost act like an invisible hand mechanism for generating massive amounts of credit. They play a fundamental role in funding the initial, widespread experimentation and deployment of major new technological ways. Think railways, electricity, the internet.
So they fuel the early innovation.
Yes, they provide the often irrational exuberance and excess capital needed for widespread experimentation with the new possibilities and for modernizing existing industries. However, the flip side is that they inevitably lead to overinvesting in the new infrastructure. Think ghost cities or fiber optic cables to nowhere, and the creation of innumerable forms of casino-like speculative schemes. So while they can accelerate technological diffusion, they also sow the seeds of their own collapse and cause significant economic pain when they burst. A real double-edged sword.
Which means the prudent investor needs to stay grounded, do their homework, and avoid getting swept up in that speculative mania. Back to basics, almost.
Very much so. Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing, writing in the intelligent investor, strongly advocated exactly that, researching stocks in microscopic, almost molecular detail.
Mm.
He wasn't looking for hype. He was looking for value.
Like his famous Northern Pipeline example.
That's the one. He discovered this company, Northern Pipeline, was trading at $65 a share, but just its holdings of high-quality bonds on its balance sheet were worth at least $80 per share. The market was completely mispricing it. It was value hidden in plain sight if you did the work.
And he was wary of big funds too, wasn't he?
Yes, he highlighted the significant drag of costs.
Yeah.
High trading costs, management fees. He noted they could easily eat up 2%, 3%, even 3.5% of returns each year. That means a big fund has to beat the market by a huge margin just to break even with the market after costs. He also stressed looking for companies with a long, unbroken history of continuance without interruption, for paying dividends as a key sign of quality and financial stability. Real substance over fleeting trends.
And then there's The Richest Man in Babylon, which simplifies financial wisdom into these almost timeless universal laws. Very different style, but similar core messages.
Very similar core messages, presented as simple parables. It emphasizes that true wealth is not in the purse he carries, but in having an income that constantly keeps his purse full. The focus is on building sustainable income streams, not just accumulating a lump sum.
And the laws of gold, they seem like warnings against common pitfalls.
They are. The book warns that wealth, gold, slippeth away from those who invest in things they don't understand, or without consulting people who are skilled in that area. It also flees from those chasing impossible earnings, get-rich-quick schemes, or those who follow the alluring advice of tricksters and schemers, or simply trust their own inexperience and romantic desires in investment. It really underscores the need for knowledge, diligence, and avoiding speculative temptations. And that a genuine, strong desire to earn more is essential, but it must be guided by wisdom.
Okay, let's bring this to our final point. Broadening the lens one last time to think about the role of organizations within society itself, their wider impact, their responsibilities beyond just making money or executing strategy. Is there a fundamental purpose?
Peter Drucker, again, offers a profound perspective in The Essential Drucker. He posits that an organization isn't just an economic entity, it's an organ of society, and it fulfills its purpose primarily through the contribution it makes to the outside environment.
Its contribution. So what's its main responsibility then?
Drucker argues that the institution's performance of its specific mission is its first social responsibility, delivering effectively on its core purpose, whether that's making goods, providing services, healing patients, educating students. That is its primary duty to society. He warns against institutions neglecting their core mission to become, say, public commentators on social issues they aren't equipped to solve. A bankrupt business, he points out, isn't a good employer or a good neighbor. Its fundamental social contribution is competence and effectiveness in its chosen field.
That's a clear perspective. How does the rise of technology, especially digital platforms and surveillance capitalism, complicate this societal role?
It complicates it immensely. Shoshana Zuboff, in The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, examines this deeply. She looks at how platforms like Facebook use sophisticated tools like the See First feature, not just to improve user experience, but to actively channel direct data on the shape of a user's social mirror. They solicit our personal priorities ostensibly for our benefit, curating the news feed, but this direct harvesting of behavioral surplus data is primarily used to increase overall engagement and time spent on the site, which fuels their advertising model.
And the danger there.
Zuboff highlights democracy's vulnerability to these powerful, often opaque, data-driven forces that can shape opinion and behavior at scale. She notes that democratic strength lies in open debate and contestation, which eventually shifts public opinion and leads to new laws and norms. But surveillance capitalism operates largely outside this process, using prediction products derived from our data to influence us in ways we don't even perceive. It's a challenge to individual autonomy and collective self-governance. And related to data's role, the paper The Technological Revolution in Financial Services discusses the concept of open banking. This is the idea that you, the consumer, should have greater control over your own financial data.
So you can share it with other providers if you choose.
It's exactly. Strategy in the digital age heavily relies on data. Open banking and open data more broadly are seen as crucial for ensuring algorithms used by financial institutions are legitimate and verifiable, and for enabling third-party innovators to create new solutions using that data. with your consent, of course. It poses challenges for regulators around privacy and security, naturally, but it also holds immense potential to boost competition, drive innovation, and potentially democratize access to financial services by breaking down the data silos held by incumbent banks.
Looking back through history again, we also see how single, powerful individuals can exert enormous influence, shaping not just organizations, but the physical and social landscape itself, often with very mixed results. Robert Moses in New York comes to mind.
A perfect and complex example. Robert Caro's monumental work, The Power Broker, details Moses's relentless drive. He wielded the enormous strength of his name and reputation as political weapons to push through his massive public works, agenda bridges, highways, parks. Caro recounts how Moses would even divert government relief labor, the Civil Works Administration, without formal permission to get projects like the Triborough Bridge built faster. Pure force of will.
But not without controversy or negative consequences.
Absolutely not. The book also meticulously documents the public complaints against his policies. For instance, he relentlessly pushed for building more and more beaches and parkways, often displacing poor communities while simultaneously working against funding allocations for desperately needed municipal sewage treatment plants. It starkly illustrates the complex, often contradictory societal impact of these larger-than-life figures and their grand projects. Progress for some often came at a steep cost for others, and his priorities weren't always aligned with the most pressing public needs.
And even seemingly straightforward local business decisions, like how a retailer sources its products, can ripple outwards and have significant societal impact, far beyond just that one company or town. Sam Walton's approach seems relevant here.
It really does. In his autobiography, Made in America, Sam Walton emphasizes how Walmart's explosive growth was rooted in fundamental principles of thinking small and, crucially, not losing touch with the customer, even as they scaled rapidly across the U.S.
Thinking small while getting huge, how did that work?
A key part was his relentless focus on sourcing. He consistently sought out offbeat suppliers or sources, bypassed intermediaries, anything to get better prices on goods. This allowed Walmart to price them low for the customer. While controversial for its impact on competitors and suppliers, this relentless drive for low prices demonstrably benefited consumers by making goods more affordable and accessible, especially in rural areas. It shows how core business decisions about sourcing and pricing, even at a local level initially, can connect to and ultimately reshape the broader economic landscape and societal patterns of consumption.
Wow. We have certainly covered a vast territory today. We've journeyed through the core ideas of strategy, the nitty-gritty of leadership and team execution, the tricky landscape of human psychology and decision-making, and even zoomed out to the big picture of markets, finance, and societal impact.
It's been quite a dive. From Rummelt's insistence on hard choices in strategy, to Drucker's focus on managerial effectiveness and leveraging strengths, right through to Taleb's stark warnings about the potential toxicity of too much information. We really have told out some powerful nuggets from an incredibly diverse set of thinkers and sources.
Yeah, invaluable stuff.
And what's really striking, I think, is the consistent thread that seems to weave through all of it. Success, whether in business, leadership, investing, or even just navigating life, it rarely seems to stem purely from innate genius or sheer luck.
So what's the common denominator then?
It often seems to boil down to things like intellectual honesty, being willing to confront uncomfortable truths, rigorous discipline in thinking, in execution, a deep, clear-eyed understanding of the competitive environment you're in, and critically, a profound awareness of human nature, recognizing our own biases, understanding the motivations of others. The most powerful insights, again and again, seem to be the ones that challenge our basic assumptions and force us to rethink how we approach problems.
That brings us to a really interesting point, something for you, our listeners, to really chew on.
Mm.
We talked earlier about that finding how in fields like investing or even medical diagnosis, getting more information can sometimes just boost our confidence without actually making us any more accurate.
Right, that confidence feels good, but it can be dangerously misleading if it's not grounded in actual improvement.
So here's the final thought to take away and mull over. If we accept that more data doesn't automatically equate to better decisions in this information-saturated world we live in, then what specific practices, what mindsets, what filters can truly help us separate the signal from the noise? How do we ensure our growing confidence is actually tethered to genuine understanding rather than just being an illusion fueled by the sheer volume of data we consume?
What stands out to you from everything we've explored today? What's one thing you could perhaps apply to sharpen your own filter for truth, to navigate the noise more effectively, and make sure your confidence is earned, not just assumed? That's the challenge for all of us.